Antarctica is Earth's southernmost continent. It is located in the South Pole and surrounded by the Southern/Antarctic Ocean. No single country rules it. It is governed by the Antarctic Treaty system, which I'll mention later on in the video. 54 countries come together through it to commonly govern the windiest and coldest continent in the world. And it's pretty big. At 14.2 million square kilometers, it's the fifth largest continent, twice the size of Australia for instance, and occupies around 1/10 of the world's landmass. The thing is, 98% of it is covered by ice. Although what's beneath the ice could be very interesting and useful, not to mention the strategic position that it holds in the world. And so there are a few countries which claimed territory on it, and a few others who want to. In this video, I'm going to try and answer the question, who effectively controls Antarctica? The official discovery of Antarctica is somewhat recent, but the knowledge of its existence is not. The long imagined but undiscovered South Polar continent was originally called Terra Australis, sometimes shortened to Australia. Who knows, maybe that's why this name was given to current Australia. In fact, it is said Australia comes from the Latin Terra Australis Incognita, meaning unknown southern land. And when we look at projected maps of the ancient times on Earth, millions of years ago, it is speculated that Australia and Antarctica were together part of a supercontinent called Gondwanaland. As for the current modern name, Antarctica is the Romanized version of the Greek compound word Antarctica, which is the feminine of Antarcticos, and it literally means opposite to the Arctic or opposite to the north. So we can understand that for various reasons, people hundreds and hundreds of years ago already hypothesized or speculated about the existence of a continent on the southern pole of the world. Aristotle wrote in his book Meteorology about an Antarctic region in around 350 BC. But the first confirmed sighting of mainland Antarctica was only on the 27th of January of 1820, and it is attributed to a Russian expedition. However, as far as I could find out, they didn't really claim the land for Russia. The first claim was made by the French in 1840, claiming Adélie land, and today they use this flag to represent their desired Antarctic domain. Then came the British, which in 1908 claimed their British Antarctic territory. At first they considered claiming all of it, but maybe they thought, hey, we already rule about a quarter of the world's area, so maybe we don't need all of this too, and settling for only a portion of it. Using this fantastic white flag since 1962, after their claim was reorganized as to be separate from that over the Falklands/Malvinas Islands. In 1923, New Zealand claimed the Ross Dependency, using their own flag, but in a lighter blue. In 1931, Norway claimed Peter First Island, and in 1939, Queen Maud Land, just using their own national flag. Australia followed in 1933, claiming their Antarctic territory, and the latest claims on the southern pole's continent were from two Southern American nations, Chile and Argentina. Chile claimed part of it in 1940, and Argentina did so in 1943. Both of them using original flags to represent their possible control over these lands, and I'm a particular fan of Argentina's. And Antarctica is an interesting case of maritime/aerial discovery because, as opposed to many other places, it was indeed discovered. There wasn't and there isn't any native population, which makes sense because most of it is a polar desert, and there has been pretty much no rain there for almost 2 million years, so it wouldn't exactly be ideal for farming and settling, although it does have a few penguins and seals which might disagree. The only current inhabitants are researchers and tourists, which by the way are growing year after year. And yet, despite not really having rain, 70% of the world's freshwater reserves are stored there. I imagine through its gigantic icebergs. This is one of the biggest reasons why countries take such a strategic interest in it. But the lack of population made it so there was no one for the colonizers to dispute the territory with, except with each other. And that's why we see a few overlapping claims, especially in the areas claimed by the UK, Chile and Argentina, who claim a lot of the same territory. An argument these Southern American nations have at one point used is that Spain had claims on Antarctica during its time as an American colonizer, even going as back to the Treaty of Tordesillas of 1494 to justify it, perhaps to justify their own claim, now as sovereign states, as an inheritance of their colonizers. Apparently, this is called the uti possidetis juris and is a principle of international law which provides that newly formed sovereign states should retain the internal borders that their preceding dependent area had before independence. And finally, interestingly, there is a significantly big portion of the continent which remains unclaimed, known as Mary Bird Land, named after the wife of the admiral who I guess reached it in 1929. Apparently, it's literally just made up of icy terrain and glaciers, being extremely remote and with no visible resources, something that might have contributed to it initially remaining unclaimed. And it could serve as a place for new claimants to settle, because at least 5 other countries have demonstrated an interest to do so. Brazil has a zone of interest already, which isn't an actual claim in the overlapping zone as well. Peru and South Africa have formally reserved their right to make a claim, and the US and Russia also reserve their right to make a future claim under the original Antarctic Treaty. And this is a good opportunity to quickly mention that treaty, which is the best way to answer that initial question of who controls Antarctica. The idea of an international agreement regarding the area gained strength because in 1957-58 it was the International Geophysical Year, marking the end of non-exchange of scientific research between the East and the West because of the Cold War. The Antarctic Treaty itself was then signed in 1959 to regulate control and usage of this new continent. It was signed by 12 countries: Argentina, Austria, Belgium, Chile, France, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, South Africa, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America, having been made to recognize that it is in the best interest of all of mankind that Antarctica shall always continue forever to be used exclusively for peaceful purposes and shall never become the scene or object of international discord. And in that spirit, the first article reads, Antarctica shall be used for peaceful purposes only, therefore prohibiting the establishment of bases, the testing of weapons, or the mining/exploration of natural resources. Also aiming to promote scientific research and cooperation in the area, something which has effectively worked. These countries have since established over 55 research stations in Antarctica, as we can see in this map here, where they are often located within specific countries' claimed areas without an issue. And even some others which hadn't signed the treaty initially joined the research effort, like Spain, Germany, or India, as well as Sweden and Finland. The reason for the creation of this treaty was the actual threat of an Antarctic war. In fact, in 1947, just after World War II, the US sent out a pretty large military expedition to the South Pole, 13 ships, 4,700 men, and numerous planes, to train themselves for the event of a conflict in that extremely cold environment. It was called Operation High Jump, but thankfully no real conflict ever hit the area, with the exception of some minor skirmishes between the UK and Argentina/Chile in the surrounding areas. And because of this treaty, all effective claims were also put on hold, but not cancelled. On Article 4 of the treaty, it is stated, no acts or activities taking place while the present treaty is in force shall constitute a basis for asserting, supporting, or denying a claim to territorial sovereignty in Antarctica. So essentially, all past claims are paused, and the door for future US and Russian claims is opened. No original claims can be enlarged, no new claims can be made, and no activity on the territory from 1961 onwards can be used as the basis for future claims. So they can't say we had a research base here, so now this should belong to us. Ever since the signing, the 12 countries were joined by many others, now making the total number of parties involved 54, most of them just having the status of observers. There's 3 groups of members of the Antarctic Secretariat: the pre-treaty claimants, the 7 we saw, the reserved claimants, US, Russia, South Africa, and Peru for some reason, and the non-claimants, everyone else involved. Jane Francis, the head of the British Antarctic Survey, once said, "One of the amazing things is that Antarctica is the only continent where people work together for peace and science." I feel like a significant reason why the treaty was possible is that despite there being claims by several nations, at the time the claims were made, none of them had the technology to explore local resources or inhabit the unbelievably inhospitable land. Furthermore, the biggest world powers at the time of the treaty, the US and Russia, had no claims and couldn't get any without effectively entering a conflict with the ones who did. So they signed a treaty preferring common ownership than to be left out. And the others agreed because despite maintaining their claim, they didn't really have any industries or settlements to protect and keep under their direct rule. However, other world issues might soon bring up some problems with a peaceful coexistence, as the fight for natural resources grows throughout the world, when the territory is extremely rich in those. When South Africa recently started having water shortages, somebody suggested towing an iceberg from Antarctica. In the surrounding Southern Ocean, fishing of krill has increased without regulation, and new rising world powers want to make sure they have a role in the future of the continent, such as China, which, per the treaty, has no right to make future claims. So, to answer the initial question, which countries control Antarctica, the answer is both none and many of them. No single country has effective control over all of it. 7 countries claim land, but these claims are suspended by the Antarctic Treaty, which 12 countries initially signed and 54 now take part in, to collectively rule the southern pole continent. However, due to the growing need of natural resources and rising tensions between old and new world powers, we might perhaps soon witness a change in the state of things regarding Antarctica. In fact, in 2048, the mining section of the treaty is set to be reviewed, and new and very different positions might emerge with the prospect of riches under the ice, such as minerals, oil, or even just the fresh water itself. So all we can hope is that future leaders can decide as well as the past ones did in 1959, putting the common interest of humankind, peace, and scientific research ahead of anything else. Thanks so much for watching this video. Subscribe if you want, and leave a comment with your opinion and suggestions for other video topics. I will see you next time for more general knowledge.